Meet the tough and tenacious tardigrade, more commonly known as water bears or moss piglets. These little animals are less than 200 micrometers, too small to see, but can reportedly survive being frozen, boiled in high heat, exposed to extreme radiation, and even placed in the vacuum of space. They have also been found almost everywhere in the world, from the deepest ocean trenches to the peaks of Antarctica. The tardigrade accomplishes this by going into its cryptobiotic, or tun state, where they shrivel up, reduce their metabolism to less than 0.1% of its normal rate, and staying underneath this force field for as long as they please. This makes the tardigrade part of a group called extremophiles, a set of creatures that can survive extreme environments like high heat or acidity. But even in this tightly knit circle, the tardigrade is set apart as the only animal in the group to survive these taxing conditions. The question is, just how extreme? Finding the tardigrades is the first hurdle. They normally reside in moist moss where bacteria and plant matter is found, which they feed off of. So a few days after it rained, we set off in search of water bears. Using a knife to scrape away the moss, we then took it back to the lab and placed it face down in spring water, soaking it for 8 hours to let the tardigrades loosen their grip on the moss. We then removed the moss, used an eyedropper to put just a little drop on a slide, and we had results. Unfortunately, due to human error, that sample was lost, something we would regret later. For as the days grew hotter, tardigrades became less and less active in the moss, and it was only until a while later we would find more wild tardigrades.
In the interim, we bought tardigrades online from a special breeding company to observe and test on them. They came a few days later all the way from South Carolina and were able to finally view them with certainty and test on them with a large supply. Now that we had a stable supply of tardigrades, we went ahead and began testing. Using a spreadsheet to record our data, we put a sample in the refrigerator and another in the freezer for 6 hours.
When we looked at the slides again, the ones in the fridge were still happily moving about, eating and swimming. However, unfortunately, most of the ones in the freezer had ceased to live. 4 of them had, however, managed to enter the tun state, and after the water thawed, they were happily munching once more. Next came a series of fortunate events. For the past few days, we had attempted to train the tardigrades to enter the tun state by exposing them slowly to more and more heat. Finally, our work paid off, and out of nowhere, 5 tardigrades all entered the tun state. Surviving boiling temperatures, this was a huge advancement. For as far as we know, we were the first people ever to train tardigrades to do anything. We also made a big advancement with finding tardigrades. In a mossy colony at the appropriately named research park in Davis, we found a colony of wild tardigrades and tested on them extensively.
The results were again promising. Most of the tardigrades survived the freezing and boiling test on the first attempt with no prepping whatsoever, either going into their tun state or sticking it out even with the use of their special covering. This pretty much proved that wild tardigrades are naturally much tougher than the ones bred in labs. We also tested again on the ones we had supposedly trained, and they performed admirably both in boiling and freezing, with all of them but the young ones going into their cryptobiotic states and surviving the extreme temperatures.
For comparison, humans can survive at maximum half an hour in a freezer. And as for boiling, let's just say there's a reason it was an ancient torture method, although most of the tardigrades came through without a scratch.
This concludes our video. The final conclusions are as follows.
Wild water bears are generally tougher than ones bred in labs.
Lab-grown ones can, however, be taught to enter the tun state through steady exposure.
And finally, tardigrades can survive much more than humans, and the many experiments done have been proved correct. Although the evidence gathered today is small, it is likely that we'll continue to experiment on these tardigrades and see if we can get them to adapt to more extreme conditions and continue to prove their true potential as the incredible species that they are.
state. After the water thawed, we were happily munching once more. I said,
What? Oh, sorry.
using a spreadsheet to record our data for. You gotta put.
For comparison, humans can survive What the hell?